Blog Talk Radio.
A radio show reaching beyond the limitations of our minds and beliefs into a world of inspiration and empowerment where the impossible is possible. To talk directly to the host or guest, call 347-637-2650 and press 1. 347-637-2650 and press 1. To learn more about your host, Betsey, and her new riveting book, Angels, Aliens, and Prophecy, as well as breaking Earth news worldwide, go to BetseyLewis.com, BetseyLewis.com. And now your host, author, intuitive, Earthkeeper, and Earth Mysteries investigator, Betsey Lewis.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I've got a great guest tonight. And NASA abandoned their moon mission after Apollo 17 in 1972, but why? That's the big question. Did they discover something too frightening to return? We're going to find out. Tonight, born-again conspiracy theorist Mike Bara, a New York Times best-selling author, screenwriter, lecturer, and secret space program researcher is here tonight to discuss his new book, Ancient Aliens on the Moon. Mike began his writing career after spending more than 25 years as an engineering consultant for major aerospace companies, where he was a card-carrying member of a military-industrial complex. Mike has been a featured guest at conferences on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and I'm sure you've seen him on there, America's Book of Secrets, and a featured guest on radio programs like Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. His books include The Choice, New York Times best-selling book, Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, which was co-written with Richard Hoagland, and his new book is Ancient Aliens on the Moon. And be sure and visit Mike's website, which is Mike Bara, that's BARA, .blogspot.com. Welcome to the show, Mike. How are you?
I'm great, Betsy. Nice to be with you. And don't forget about The Choice. That was my second book in there.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Great.
Which is still selling, still in your bookstores, still available. So, by all means.
Cool. Well, listen, your book was just mind-blowing. What a fascinating book. And I can't wait to find out more about it. But let's start how you got into all this. How did it all begin for you?
That's an interesting question, and it's not a very short answer. I think we only have an hour, right? We're doing an hour.
We do only an hour.
I got to be quick.
Okay.
To make a long story short, what happened with me was that I'd always kind of been interested in these sorts of things, and anomalies and things along those lines. And one day I was in the office working for a fairly major aerospace company, and I walked by on my lunch hour, and I noticed a bunch of my friends in a little room watching a video, and I went in there to see what this video was, and it was this guy named Richard C. Hoagland talking about this thing called the face on Mars. And I became really fascinated as I watched the video. I was really very impressed with how he presented the case. And what really got me interested the most was the fact that it was something you could actually put your finger on. You could actually, theoretically get better pictures of this area called Cydonia on Mars. And it was the kind of thing where you could actually prove the case, as opposed to UFOs, which is the kind of thing that you'll never, ever really prove. It will just, they're lights in the sky, so to speak, and there's really not much more you can say about them than that. You can't really do anything or land or take samples and that sort of thing. So to make a long story short, I became interested in this through a series of non-coincidences, because I don't believe in coincidences. I got connected with Mr. Hoagland. I ended up doing some writing for his website for about 10 years, and then I finally said, why don't we write a book? And that was Dark Mission, and since we came out with that in 2007, I've kind of gone off on my own and written a little bit more about the link between physics and spirituality, which is what the choice is about, and physics, spirituality in 2012. And now I'm back to my roots with Ancient Aliens on the Moon, talking about extraterrestrial ruins on the moon.
Cool.
So that gets us up to today.
Now, Richard Hoagland's a little controversial, isn't he?
Well, Richard has his critics, as we all do. I've got my fair share of critics. It's not really something that, Richard has been basically, his once was said of him that if jumping to conclusions were an Olympic sport, he'd have 10 gold medals. The reality is that Richard is willing to go places certain other people are not. And that sometimes gets him into places that there's not a good way to get out of. But look, I'm going to tell you, most of the time he ends up being right, and in the long run, he's usually correct. So, the bottom line is that he's basically, I think, discovered some incredible things, some amazing stuff on Mars and on the moon, and that's part of his discoveries, or his discoveries are part of what Ancient Aliens on the Moon is all about.
Well, I've always felt that so much has been kept from us, that NASA and, what they've seen up there, that's all been kept from us. The truth was out there. And what you've uncovered and, the amazing photos you have in your book, I was just blown away by it. There's just so much in here.
Thanks. And by the way, one thing I was going to tell the listeners is if you do go to my blog, if you go to mikebara.blogspot.com, if you go there, there's a tab at the top that says photos. If you go there, there's a link to a Picasso web album where I have all of the photos from the book, from Ancient Aliens on the Moon, all in high resolution on the computer. So you can see them, because a lot of detail does get lost in the transfer from the computer screen to the print page. It just does get lost. That's all there is to it.
Mike, now tell us, what is the moon made of? And don't say cheese.
It's not cheese. Basically, the interesting thing, the thing that I found out in doing the research for the book was that basically it's made out of the same stuff as the Earth. And even more interestingly, it's made out of the light mantle stuff, or the upper crust stuff primarily of the Earth. In other words, it's not made of heavy, dense interior stuff, and that kind of implies, and I go over this in the first chapter, that it was fissioned off, it was somehow spun off from the Earth originally, at least as a natural satellite. It was sort of spun off, and also I cover that in the choice. Also in my second book, I cover the solar fission theory of planetary formation. And that's what I've really come to believe at this point. They've done a study of titanium, oxygen isotopes and found that it's made out of the same stuff, so it kind of blows away a lot of the other theories that are out there about how the moon formed. It was part of the Earth at one time. It was fissioned away. The Earth did not get kicked by some other large object, because there would be some sort of mixture of the two sets of minerals and materials, and that's not the case. So we know at the beginning that it was part of the Earth. Now, who's come along and done a little modification to it from that point forward is the really interesting question, and it's the subject of the book.
Now, tell me something. I know that there's been rumors that the moon rang like a bell or something, like it's hollow inside. Where did that come from, and is there any truth to it?
Yeah, it is true. And what happened was that was, I believe, Apollo 15, I want to say, although I'm not positive. And what happened was that they had placed seismometers all around the moon, and they actually took the lunar module, the upper stage, the ascent stage of the lunar module, which had docked with the command module, and then they flew the lunar module into the moon itself and wanted to measure seismically the impact. And when they did, it basically rang, and these impacts was registered for well over an hour, which was very surprising to them. Now, there are two possible implications for that. One is that the moon is kind of hollow, and there are vast caverns underneath it, which is distinctly a possibility because there are some pictures in the book and in Ancient Aliens on the Moon where I show you parts where the skin of the moon appears to be pulled apart, and underneath you see girders and support struts and all sorts of mechanical-looking stuff. So that is a possibility. Another possibility is a theory that I have that Richard Hoagland came up with, which is the idea that there are very large glass scaffolding type of structures above the lunar surface, stretching in some cases several miles above the surface, and that those are also shaking and vibrating and helping create this ringing sound that went on for over an hour. So it could be a little bit of both, actually.
Interesting. And then now maybe there's civilization underneath the moon. Is that possible?
Absolutely, it's possible. The thing about the moon is that there, again, as I said, there are images that I have placed in the book where you can see parts of the moon sort of rendered apart, ripped apart, and in there, you absolutely categorically do see what appears to be architectural structure underneath the surface of the moon, and you can see there's this one thing I call the drill, which is sort of extends for just dozens and dozens of miles along the lunar surface, and then it terminates in a hillside, and there are supports and wires and things holding it up, and it appears to be, connected to some sort of inner chamber. So yeah, there's lots of evidence in looking at photographs of the fact that the moon may in fact be, substantially hollow, I guess.
Now, Mike, do you feel that this is a base right now for ETs, and they are, they can visit us anytime, but they're hiding out there, and what do you think? Or are these like ancient beings that stayed there? Is this more recent, more contemporary type of beings being there, or what do you think?
The book is called Ancient Aliens on the Moon for a reason, because I think these are ancient ruins that we're looking at. I think they've been there a very, very long time. Yeah. You hear all kinds of rumors about, there being modern, current active bases on the moon, and some of them are actually our military, and some of them are extraterrestrial. But the truth is, nobody really knows, and I don't see any evidence of that. I don't actually see anything I could point to and say that appears to me to be an active base with, stuff coming and going. Everything that I've seen, everything that I present in the book does appear to be ancient alien stuff. It looks like it's stuff that's been in ruins, it's been abandoned, it's been there for a long time, thousands if not millions of years. So I guess that would have to be my conclusion initially, is that we're looking at older stuff.
Now, I know you talked about astronomers seeing many things through the years, at least the last 100 years. They've seen different things on there, and then they seem to, disappear. And now, is that true? Did they actually disappear? Are there different structures that have been there and then suddenly vanish?
Well, that's referring to transient lunar phenomenon, and those tend to be, TLPs tend to be, they're sort of specks of light, specular reflections of light that seem to come and go on the lunar surface. And the question is, what are they and what causes them? Now, there have been a bunch of theories over the years. There are, these observations have actually gone back thousands of years of these colored areas of the moon. And what I think is actually happening is that astronomers are catching these large scaffolding, transparent kind of scaffolding glass structures above the surface of the moon that are just the light's happening to hit a pane of this glass stuff at just the right angle, and it is reflecting back to the camera or the telescopic lens, and they're recording the stuff. And then as the moon continues to move and the phase angle changes, these things go away. I don't think they're gaseous sort of outgassing events like a lot of people think they are. I think it's really just the light hitting these particular glass structures in just such a way that it reflects rather brilliantly back to the camera or the telescope, as the case may be. So, and there's a lot of different stuff I put in Ancient Aliens on the Moon that can support that. So.
That's fascinating. Now, do you think there's two NASAs going on? The one that we see, which is, that's kind of obsolete, and maybe there's another NASA that is visiting the moon all the time, and other places in our solar system that we don't know about, astronauts being out there already, or are we just being hoodwinked here?
Well, there is a lot of rumors to that extent, and what I can tell you is that I do have friends who have directly heard some of the astronauts over the years basically complain about that very thing and say that we're just spam in a can, and these other guys have all this sophisticated technology that they got from the aliens, and they've had it since the 50s, and they've been to the moon, and they've been to Mars and back, over and over again. And then you have some of these crazy stories from some of these people about teleporting to the moon with Barack Obama and all this stuff. But again, there's no evidence to support. There's no evidence to support any of that. All we can do is look at the footage that we have and look at the information that we have. And we do know that we did have, a public space program. It did take a lot of pictures. There are some extraordinary things on those pictures, which is what Ancient Aliens on the Moon is all about. And the other thing I guess I would say about it is that ultimately I think it doesn't really matter all that much whether there's a secret space program going on, because the truth is we aren't ever going to be kind of let in on that, unless things really fall apart in a big way. It's almost kind of irrelevant. There is footage from space shuttle missions that show what appear to be powered vehicles in low Earth orbit flying around, maneuvering like flying saucers, and a lot of people are convinced these are aliens. But I don't know why the aliens would announce to NASA and say, "Hey, by the way, guys, we're going to be at 33 degrees latitude, right above Chile. If you guys want to take some pictures of it." I think what we're actually seeing is testing of our own secret space program stuff. So I think the program exists, but other than that, looking at footage from the space shuttle and projects like that, I really can't say for sure whether that's a reality that I can actually put my finger on.
Interesting. So do you think that we have always had one moon, or do you think we had more than one moon out there?
That's a question I did not expect, to tell you the truth, but as far as I can tell, I think we've had one. I do subscribe to this theory of the late Dr. Tom Van Flander, who wrote a book called Dark Matter, Missing Planets, and New Comets. And in his book, he talked about the solar fission theory that he had of planetary formation. And as part of that theory, what you would get is big gas giant planets that would then sort of siphon off multiple moons, like we see in the Jovian system, like we see with, Europa and Io and all the Jovian moons. And the smaller rocky terrestrial planets, that they call them on the inner solar system, would just have one rather large moon, like we have here with the Earth. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think in terms of that theory, I think that Mercury is an escape moon of Venus. I think it used to be the moon of Venus. I don't think it's a planet all of its own, and I think that was probably the case. So in that sense, I would have to answer that question, and I really think there's only one that we've ever had.
Okay. Now, do you think it was placed here on purpose, that someone actually helped it be above us and create our tides and, help people go lunacy, we talk about lunacy, and so do you think that it maybe was put here by someone or created here? Well,
there seems to be some intent in the design and the placement and the size of it. As I said earlier, I do think it's a natural object. I think that it may have been moved since then a little bit to adjust physics and adjust how it affects our consciousness, because again, this is all stuff out of my second book, The Choice, where I talk about how physical alignments of planets and their spin energy does have a dramatic effect on electrical instruments, on physical instruments like free-swinging pendulums, and even on our consciousness. And so there's no question that these things do have an effect, and that it does definitely affect the life force, the life energy that's here on the Earth. So my answer to that would be, I think people have fooled around with the moon to add stuff to it and maybe move it into the right place to do certain things. I don't think it got to be where it is just purely by a set of random cosmic coincidences, that's for sure. Right.
Yeah, it just seems too perfect. But, without the moon, we wouldn't have the tides. There just wouldn't be anything here. I mean, it creates our Earth.
right, there'd be too much angular momentum or spin energy in the system. The Earth would spin too fast. The days would be too short. And quite likely the spin energy, its centrifugal force, would probably make the wind so high on the surface of the Earth that we'd probably all kind of be flattened like pancakes. So the truth is, without the moon to sort of govern all of this stuff, we would higher forms of life would probably not be able to have evolved or have been placed here, depending on what your philosophy is.
Mm-hmm. Right. You know, I've always had this thought in the back of my mind that maybe we go around skipping to planet. We destroy one and then we go to another one. Like maybe we destroyed Mars because there's evidence of that, I think. And here we are on Earth. We're getting ready to destroy it again. And then we're going to move on to another planet.
I'm not much of a believer in what I think is a myth that the human race is somehow detrimental to the environment of the Earth. I'm not a believer in that whatsoever. No, I think that's a fallacy that's been created by people whose desire is to gain control over the human race. I think it's all been invented. But separate from that, something really bad happened to the moon, or to Mars and to the moon and to Venus. And you know, the truth is that Mars is not, in fact, a planet at all. It's actually the moon of a large planet, what they now call a super Earth, that used to exist in the orbit very near where Mars is now, and it was devastated in an explosion of that planet. And the question for me is, you know, what caused that explosion? Was it some sort of conflict, or was it something natural? Was it an accident?
Right.
They were fooling around with forces that they shouldn't have been fooling around with? I don't know. And I think that's one of the enduring mysteries of Mars that I hope that someday in my lifetime, I hope we're able to solve.
I hope so, too. There's just so many mysteries up there. But, you know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that says that NASA never went to the moon, that it was just all faked in a studio. But there's a lot of things, you know, maybe part of it was. Do you think that's possible? Because there are some strange things. In 1969, digital camera or computers were in their infancy, large, bulky machines filled NASA and JPL, and with complex calculations needed for a manned-moon mission, their computers at the time seemed sadly inadequate. So what do you think about that?
Well, actually, there's a chapter in Ancient Aliens on the Moon where I deal with this specifically, and what I say is that it's just not correct. I mean, I know there's several theories, some new fanciful ones about, you know, one guy claiming that Stanley Kubrick filmed all the moon landings, you know, in a studio in Area 51, and I think that stuff is just silly. I think very clearly that we did go to the moon, but some of the secrecy and the things that don't add up and that don't make sense to people are really that's real, and you really are picking up on a vibe that there were things that they were hiding from us. But what I think that they're hiding from us is why they really went to the moon. And, for instance, in Dark Mission, my first book, I talk about some of the Masonic ceremonies that were done by Buzz Aldrin and others on the lunar surface. What they were hiding is what they were really doing there, including the ritualistic aspects of the missions, the religious aspects of them, and what I think were some of the missions were absolutely technological salvage missions. They were there to go to some of these ruins, pick up some of this technology and try to bring it back to the Earth and see if they could exploit it. There's no question in my mind that that's what the secrecy is that we're feeling, you know. And I can remember even as a little boy watching the first landing and wondering to myself, you know, well, we've got a colored TV here. Why are we only getting this terrible, crappy, black and white picture from the surface of the moon? And as it turns out, it was even degraded significantly from what the actual transmission quality was. And I think now, from what I know and looking at the pictures and looking at all the ruins of the ancient aliens on the moon, what I know now is that they were just really worried about what we were going to be able to see. And so they deliberately put really bad cameras and used really bad transmission techniques to try to keep us from seeing stuff they didn't want us to see and asking questions about it.
Interesting. Let me throw out a couple more things to you and let you answer these. Now, I know that, batteries are temperamental, and they don't do well in extreme heat and cold. And the moon has a daytime temperature, excuse me, I'm starting to lose my voice here, but temperature of 265 degrees and a night temperature of 170. Is that true?
Yeah, well, the night temperature would be like minus 170. So, yeah, basically if you step from shadow to sunlight, you get an extreme swing of several hundreds of degrees, yeah.
So would that have been a major problem for Apollo, the first mission?
No, not really, because they were absolutely prepared for all that stuff. They were definitely prepared for that. And people argue that the film and the cameras would have melted at 250 degrees Fahrenheit, but the thing is, in an absolute airless vacuum, like the moon situation, it's not like an oven. You don't have convection, you don't have conduction, all you have is radiative heat. So all you really need to do to keep something inside, inside like a camera, inside the camera case, and all you need to do to keep the film at a proper temperature is to cover it with something white, and that white will reflect the light and therefore reflect the heat. So they really had all these things figured out, and again, I don't know the details of the batteries that were used on the missions, but most of them were internal, and there was internal heating, so I would think that really wasn't a major problem. And, of course, we've all tried to start our car at low temperatures, but, I'd have to go into really deep into the technical details to understand that. But it seems to me it was not an insurmountable problem.
Right. And we just talked about this, but if the astronauts were they should have been able to take high-resolution color camera footage inside the Apollo cabin, but they used low-definition black and white cameras to broadcast life on the moon. And do you think that's because they were covering up certain things that they just didn't want to see?
Actually, this is not exactly right. This is really interesting. It's not exactly correct. Like on Apollo 11, the very first mission to the moon, they did have a high-resolution, high-definition color camera on board the spacecraft, but they were ordered to leave that in the command module, which orbited the moon, and not take it down with them to the lunar surface. They were only allowed to take the really crappy black and white camera. And again, there were scientists and engineers that protested this, and they said, well, what? We're not going to take any live TV with a color camera? Why are we photographing, the first expedition of the human race to the moon in such an incredibly stingy way? There are even quotes that I've got about that stuff. And it doesn't make any sense unless you look at it in the context of them wanting to cover up and hide certain things and them being worried about what you might be able to see in the distance over the horizon, stuff that might be there, including, the many miles high glass towers that I talk about in several different chapters in the book.
And that's interesting. I think about what happened with Apollo 11. I've watched the movie a few times, and you think about how they had to rush and put things together and how they did that. It was amazing how they got the astronauts back. But when
you mean Apollo 13. Yeah, you mean Apollo 13.
Right, 13. I mean 13. Yeah, 13. That's what I meant. Yeah. So that number 13. It was. I don't think they'll ever name anything 13 again, will they?
Well, not only was, and again, this is one of these things I just don't buy as a coincidence. It was Apollo 13. It launched at 13:13 was the actual moment that it was launched. It just none of this stuff just adds up. To me, when I see this kind of thing, I just think to myself, this was all planned by somebody at some level, and I don't think it's a random coincidence that Apollo 13 is the moment of the problem, and then it launched in 13:13, and just a lot of things that happen like that are just you kind of go, what sort of really weird religious aspects are there to the space program that maybe we don't know about.
Now, does that go back to the Nazis that became a part of NASA? Or that's a part of this whole little group that, and that sounds really weird. We have Nazi scientists that were there. I'm not sure they're there anymore, but I'm sure they've passed away or they've, retired, but.
Well, they've certainly got their successors are certainly there, and what Richard Hoagland and I found out in my first book, in Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, was that basically everybody who was in a position of power at NASA was either a Nazi, and by that I mean actually in many cases members of the SS, as Werner von Braun was, Dr. Werner von Braun. They were either Nazis, they were Freemasons, or they were what we called the magicians. They were people who practiced and were into a lot of esoteric teachings and black magic, and they were primarily located at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, out in Pasadena, that handled all of the unmanned probes to the moon. So what you actually have is a situation where basically everybody who was anybody at NASA was a member of one of these three secret societies, and in reality, each of those secret societies had the same basic belief system, which is that they were direct descendants of the three gods of ancient Egypt, Isis and Osiris and Horus, who came from the stars, who came down and gave civilization and everything to the human race. And so it's pretty weird. And then when you get into all the different Masonic rituals that were done, and the naming of the spacecraft were named after, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the symbol of the Apollo program, was right out of ancient Egypt and sort of an homage to Osiris. It gets pretty weird pretty quick. And the reality is, that is true. There was a lot of people that were members of one of these three secret societies, and they all kind of had the same objectives and the same rather strange belief system. And that was what the first book was about.
I know we could do a whole show about Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove up in Northern California, where a lot of this goes on, the Skull and Bones ceremonies and everything. That'd be a whole another show, wouldn't it?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it would. So, and how do you feel about that? Maybe we should just touch on that for a minute. Do you think that NASA is a part of that?
Well, again, there's no question that the people at the top levels of NASA, there's no question that they were involved with a lot of different secret societies and what we would consider to be very odd or abnormal by today's standards, esoteric beliefs. And they definitely, sort of stamped those belief systems on the space program in symbolic but very indelible ways. So there's absolutely no question in my mind that is the truth, and that they did absolutely, do that in the space program. But that's another book. That's, Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies. That's maybe 2014. I got Ancient Aliens on the moon right now. I got Ancient Aliens on Mars next year, and then maybe we'll worry about Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies after that. So. Oh,
cool. So do you think aliens are actually working with NASA or our government?
Well, people say that. People say that. There's that rumor. I have no evidence of that. All I can tell you for sure is that there is a lot of stories like that. But again, to me it seems that NASA is a public entity, and as such would kind of be out of the loop on these things. I think a lot of the extraterrestrial interaction, assuming that it was real, would be taking place at a lot higher pay grade than anybody at NASA is right now.
Right. I've always wondered if NASA didn't stand for Nazi or something, administration, something or other. NASA is actually an ancient Babylonian word, which means to reach up to the stars. And it also the reporters that used to cover the agency back in the 60s used to joke that it meant never a straight answer. That's what it stood for. So, so it's a very interesting thing, and that's what you find as you dig into the stuff in the secret societies. You find that they do tend to operate this way. That there are reasons why certain acronyms are picked and so forth. But there's thought put into that. That's kind of a strange thought to think that NASA is a part of that. And now we're getting away from NASA. We have private enterprises out there that are sending spaceships out there that are going to send people out there to the moon and beyond. And what do you think about all that?
Not much. Not much. I think that they lack the resources. They lack the technical and the financial resources to really accomplish anything, and I think this is just more distraction. And the truth is, if we really wanted to go back there in a serious way and really wanted to go back there in an honest way, that we could do it, in the next 20 minutes if we wanted to. Certainly, we could do it within a couple of years. But the reality is, I don't put much hope or faith into those things. I think that any of those programs are going to have a hard time being successful. I think they won't get much cooperation from NASA. They'll probably get a lot of interference, and I just don't see a scenario where the governmental control of the flow of information about extraterrestrial ruins is going to be lifted anytime soon. I just don't believe it.
Now talk about the structures that have been found on there, because you have some amazing photographs on here, some color photographs too. I love those that you added to your book, and they're just amazing. Now there was a couple of places I couldn't really tell what they were, and probably because in black and white it didn't transfer over, as clear as it could have. But there are amazing things. Talk about some of the structures that have been found that are just like there's something 20 miles high, right?
Right. Well, what I would do is I would refer you to mikebara.blogspot.com and then go to the photo page and go to the web album and look up all the pictures, because if there's any pictures that weren't as clear to you, they will be probably a lot clearer in full resolution on your computer. So. There's various different kinds of structures, and the first set that we talk about really are these gigantic towering glass structures which appear to be over the surface of the moon. They're thicker, they're more dense in certain places like Sinus Medii and Mare Crisium. There seems to be more evidence of these things, and there's no question that these sort of glass scaffolding tower-type structures do exist on the surface of the moon, and the purpose of those appears to be that they were a meteor shield. Now, that may seem kind of counterintuitive to people at first, except that glass in a vacuum like this is actually twice as strong as steel. So the reality is, if you were going to build a meteor shield that would sort of take the place of the atmosphere of the planet Earth, give it the same kind of protection, you would want to build it out of glass. That would be the ideal material to build it from. And then you've got other kinds of structures. There are what appears to be a pyramid, a ziggurat kind of structure on the far side of the moon. All around that, there are vehicles that look like they've just been parked and left there. There's abandoned sort of lifting body type craft. There's something that looks like some sort of crane or backhoe or something with, which has like the body of a tank and sort of a manipulator arm on top of it, like the space shuttle used to have. And even in the same picture, you see the giant drill object I talked about earlier. And up above that on the hillside, there's something in a bunker that is carved right out of the side of a mountain. Looks like some sort of hangar or bunker. And I swear to God, it's a flying saucer sitting in there. It's got landing gear and some sort of gun or something on it, and I've got that picture in the book. And then there's other stuff that looks like partially buried construction, and there you can see roads and you can see buildings. There's a thing that looks like a giant 5-mile high paper clip, which is probably some kind of antenna. So there's just anything you can think of, including glass domes over craters, clear transparent glass domes over craters, are visible in these images. You just have to know where to look. You have to be able to get a good version of them, and be able do the enhancement work and say to yourself, well, I guess I'm willing to believe that's actually really what it is. But because it kind of hits you right in the face. There's no way around it. It kind of hits you right in the face.
Now, Mike, you say that there's some crystalline or glass structures on the moon, but how would those survive meteors hitting the moon so often?
Well, again, they wouldn't. But again, as I just told you, the glass in a lunar environment, in the vacuum of the lunar environment, would be about twice as strong as steel. So it would be an ideal protection. It would be an ideal sort of protection. And there's even a really amazing picture, and I forget which chapter it is. I want to say it's chapter 4 of Ancient Aliens on the Moon, and I'm wrong about that. I'm just looking at it right now. Let me look. It might be chapter 3. There's a really amazing picture taken. Yeah, it's chapter 3, taken from Apollo 15, And it's an image, a photograph taken looking back at the moon after Apollo 15 has left orbit and it's returning to Earth, and you can see this gauzy, hazy, sort of glowing layer of something covering the moon, and it looks almost identical to the air glow layer of the Earth, and that's this glass structure that's built up above the surface of the moon, and the idea behind it is it protects the civilization that was on the moon in the same way that the atmosphere protects us from all but the very, very large meteors. I mean, we get hit by tens of thousands of tons of meteorite stuff every day, but the atmosphere acts like a giant shield and burns most of that stuff up before it can ever hit the ground. And so I think that this is stuff that's serving the same, these glass towers are serving the same function on the moon as the atmosphere serves on the Earth. And I mean, that picture, that Apollo 15 photograph is just extraordinary because there's no explanation for it. There's really only two possibilities. One, the moon really does have an atmosphere, which I don't believe. Or two, these glass structures that we see in so many of the images in the background over the horizon are actually really there. And you kind of, either way, NASA's version of what the moon looks like is a load of baloney, either way.
Wow. It's just so incredible. I know I was looking at those photos again, and there's that structure, what is it? It's like 20 miles high, and it's suspended in space, or is there wires holding it up, do you think?
Yeah, there's an object called the castle, which is over the Sinus Medii, the sea in the middle. And the extraordinary thing about that image is that it's not enhanced in any way by any electronic methods. It's literally it's on the original photographic negative. You print it out, you enlarge it, and you can see this thing, and it is not any kind of scratch. It is absolutely something really there, and you could even see a wire sort of hanging that this thing is hanging from. And then, the other proof is that there's a second photograph taken just a split second later, and you can see the same object, but it's slightly foreshortened and turned slightly, and that's from the motion of the spacecraft moving right to left. And so, again, you have confirmation from those two stereoscopic photographs, in essence, that this is what something that really, really was hanging there 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 miles above the surface of the moon that one of the astronauts photographed. And it's just, it's just astonishing. But once you see that, there's nothing that you can say except that this is artificial. There is no way around that conclusion that the structure is artificial. And then,
amazing.
Things are pretty amazing, and your mind kind of explodes at that point.
How did you acquire all these photos? Was it the Freedom of Act information?
Freedom of Information Act? No.
Yeah.
They come from many different sources. Some of them are actually from the official NASA sources, and although I've got a lot of scans of images from official NASA sources that are online, many of those I've found have been modified. They've been altered. Interesting stuff has been removed, but a lot of things slip through the cracks. They'll erase the ziggurat. They'll erase this giant pyramid that's in the middle of the picture, but they'll miss the flying saucer in a bunker that's up on a hillside because they're just not looking. And so things slip through the cracks. And some of them are cases like that. Others are, in the case of the object we just talked about, the castle, that was a situation where various different researchers ordered the same photograph from different NASA archives, and they got 9 different versions of the same picture number, which implies that NASA wanted to kind of hide these particular images under one frame number, and it just all sorts of weird things have gone on with photographs. So there's some NASA sources. Another source that's been very critical is a gentleman named Ken Johnson Jr., who is a friend of Mr. Hoagland's, and he's a friend of mine, and I worked with his wife at Boeing, which is actually how I got involved in all this. And he at one time was the manager that kind of had control over all of the Apollo handheld photography that was taken during the Apollo mission. And back in the 1970s, there were 4 complete sets of all these photographs, original first-generation prints. And he was told to destroy them all. And he begged and pleaded to be able to loan these to colleges and universities, and he was told, no, that the order had come down from headquarters that they were to all be destroyed. And in retrospect, I now realize they were trying to control the database. They were trying to keep things from slipping through the cracks, as they have. But Ken defied the orders, and he kept one set, and he gave a bunch of them to his alma mater, Oklahoma City University, and he kept many, many others for himself. So he defied his orders. Now, unfortunately, the ones at Oklahoma City have since disappeared. We believe that there was a professor there who kind of ran off with all of them. But Ken's kept an awful lot of photographs, I think well over 1,000 of these original first-generation prints. And when you compare Ken's prints to the current version that are scanned online on the NASA database, what you find very consistently is that all of the really cool, interesting stuff has been whitewashed off the current versions of the NASA print. So if we didn't have Ken's original back in the 1960s first-generation prints, there's a lot of anomalies, a lot of really interesting things that simply would have disappeared from the database. So that's really been critical to the investigation over the years.
So why do you think NASA wants to keep us in the dark? I mean, what would be the reason to control us? I mean, why don't they want us to know that there are other beings in our universe? I mean, there's probably life everywhere out there, but yet they don't want us to know anything. It's kind of like the movie The Truman Show, where Truman, is a part of this reality show. He was brought up that way, and he didn't know that it's not a real world, and suddenly he awakens. Is that what's going to happen to us, that we're going to awaken someday?
The Truman Show is pretty interesting because what happens to wake him up is that one of the stars falls out of the sky, and it's just a light, and the star is Sirius. Now, Sirius just coincidentally happens to be equivalent to the goddess Isis, which is one of the gods and goddesses that NASA worships all the time. So when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, they're really trying to tell us something symbolically here with the Truman Show. But yeah, it's exactly the same kind of process. And to answer the first part of the question, back in the 1950s when NASA was first formed, they commissioned a report called the Brookings Report. And again, I talk about this in Ancient Aliens on the Moon. It's also discussed briefly in a little bit in Dark Mission. And it basically said to them, look, you're probably not going to run into ET himself, but you may come across ruins and artifacts on the Moon or on Mars or on Venus, which are going to basically prove that they've visited us before and that they're superior to us. And if you find this out, technologically superior to us, and if you find this out, you need to probably not tell anybody, because if you tell people, it will drive them crazy. And they cited the War of the Worlds broadcast as an example of the kinds of things that would go on. And, fascinatingly, Stanley Kubrick, to bring Stanley Kubrick back into it, he stated flat out that his film 2001: A Space Odyssey was all based on the conclusions of the Brookings Report. That's the story it was telling, was that exact same thing. They find an artifact on the Moon, they choose not to tell anybody about it, and it drives the computer HAL 9000. It drives them crazy. So that's what 2001 was really all about. Now, the second part of the question as to what was the second part of the question? It was why wouldn't they tell us? Well, the second part is will this stuff come out? And the truth is, again, this goes back to my second book, The Choice, where I talk about the 2012 era and the 2012 energy field that we're in. And what that's really going to do is that's going to push the truth out. There's no way that people that are in charge, the powers that be, are going to be able to continue to suppress the truth, because we're living in an apocalypse. Welcome to the apocalypse. We're in it right now. What people don't realize is the word apocalypse simply means to lift the veil or revelation. It means to reveal that which has been hidden. So that in of itself is what causes the conflict and the chaos of the apocalyptic time, is the fact that the truth is finally revealed. So we're moving out of Pisces, the obscure age, or where things are obfuscated, under Pisces, and into the age of Aquarius, where things come out into the light. So, the reality is they're not going to be able to hide this stuff from us. That does not mean there's going to be a disclosure. That does not mean Obama's going to, come up on TV and say, we've been talking to aliens for 50 or 60 years. I don't believe that's going to happen at all. But what's going to happen is more and more of this information is just going to leak out. And again, I think you're seeing 2012 energy. I think we had an election a week ago that I, at this point, am pretty firmly convinced did not come out the way it was announced to come out. I mean, there's so many problems with this election, and there is this bubbling undercurrent going on right now of people that just don't believe these election results. They, there really is no. There's no now. You could look at it two different ways. You can look at it. I know we got to wrap up here, but you can look at it as saying, okay, this election was really, really weird because people are in a really weird mood because of the 2012 energy. Or you could say that, yeah, the election really was stolen. Barack Obama really did not win the election. And that is going to bubble over and cause this sort of, I hate to use the word revolution because it sounds violent, but there is going to be a lot of major shifts, in our hierarchies and structures in the next few years. And 2012 is sort of the center point, the launch point of all that stuff. That's what the Mayans were trying to tell us, is things are going to get really weird, folks. And
they are. I agree with you, Mike. There's so much going on right now. And, it's the light workers against the dark workers out there, if you want to call them that. And, they're just not going to win because, it's like the 100th monkey. We're all awakening now, and they're not. Right.
and I mean, again, I watch things symbolically. I mean, I don't just write about ancient aliens on the moon. I'm always watching the symbolism. And about 5 days before the election, they started showing the film 7 Days in May. And the film 7 Days in May is about a military coup attempt to throw the President of the United States out. And it was a very prominent general. And first of all, there was an admiral who was in command of the Mediterranean fleet. He was at the center of the controversy. He was removed from command. And then the general, very highly, very well-respected military general, who was the center of the coup, who was going to take over from the president, was basically blackmailed with a sex scandal. And then literally within days of this film being broadcast, the head of the Mediterranean fleet, the guy in exactly the same position as the character in the film, is removed from his command. Nobody's seen him since. A day after the election, Petraeus resigns in a, quote, sex scandal that people are just saying doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's all this chaos going on, and we're wondering, well, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Was there really a military coup, and were the bad guys behind that, or are the good guys trying to overthrow Obama because he stole the election, or did he steal the election because they're the good guys and the bad guys were going to kill him? And who knows? All I know is that this is not over with, and things are not going to be normal anytime soon, and it's going to be a fascinating ride for everybody.
Oh, it is. And, I just know that our leaders aren't the people they pretend to be. There's a lot of dark stuff going on in our world right now, and we all have to awaken because it's really important. We're going through some really tough times, but I don't know if you feel that our Earth is going to shift. Have you ever gone into that? I mean, we're talking about a shift.
Yeah, again, I really kind of came on to talk about ancient aliens on the moon, but let's go back to The Choice, which is my second book, and I do talk about that. And physically, I don't believe in the physical pole shift scenario. I did research that. I think something like that has happened in the past, but I don't think it's a regular thing. But here's the reality. The reality is we are going to get hit with this very intense energy from the center of the galaxy, and the Mayans talk about that, and what I've tried to get across to people is it's not guaranteed that we won't have a physical effect, because I think we've had earthquakes that have happened when we've been hit with this pulse of energy. And I talk in The Choice about what that pulse of energy is, and it's actually a beam of what's called torsion energy. And, that is going to hit us. It's going to hit us on December 21st. It's going to continue to hit us into January and February of next year. But the truth is, what we have to decide is what are we going to do with that energy. The Mayans say that we are that on December 21st, 2012, the Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan is going to ride this serpent rope, which is this twisting torsion beam of energy, to the Earth. It's going to manifest here in 3 dimensions, and it's going to pass judgment on our planet. And when we hear that, we think of the biblical Western, you're good, you're bad, you go to heaven, you go to hell kind of judgment, but it's not that kind of judgment. The judgment that he's going to make is, what is our intent for the future of this planet? And that's why I wrote The Choice, is to try to get everybody to understand that they have a role to play the apocalypse is not something that happens to you, it is something that you choose the outcome of through your thoughts and your prayers and basically what you're putting out. So what I'm trying to get everybody to really focus on is that reality. And I think now more than ever, it's really important that we understand that a lot of weird stuff's going to go down, and a lot of truths are going to come out, and we're going to be very shocked. We're going to be very shocked to think about what happens in the future.
We are, but it's our awakening. It's time.
Yeah.
We've been kept in the dark for so long, and now it's like I said, the 100th monkey. We're awakening to the truth, and they can't.
Well, even down to people's mortgages. If the bank loaned you money to buy your house, why are you listed in the paperwork as the homeowner?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you why. Because it was actually your credit, your money to purchase the house, not the bank's money. And so there's all kinds of truths, all kinds of things that when people find out the extent to which they've been stolen from and lied to, things are going to get chaotic and very, very crazy. They
are. Yeah, there's a lot of rumors about another civil war in this country, and people are getting ready for it. I pray that's not true.
Well, and again, I talk about this in the choice. Go buy Ancient Aliens on the Moon, but the choice is still out there. I talk about this in the choice. The first step is polarization, and everybody's going to have to choose a side. We're going to have to choose the spiritual or the material. That doesn't mean we choose Republican or Democrat, left or right. It means we choose the spiritual world or the material world is what I think the choice is. Mm-hmm. And then based on that choice, we're going to be all of our hierarchies and structures are going to be stressed and to the limit. That includes our monetary systems, our governmental systems. But the cool thing is that we get to decide what we're going to replace with it and how we're going to make it.
Right. That's right. We're going to awaken because they can't keep us in the dark anymore.
Nope.
They're the cockroaches.
The energy.
They've got to run for the dark.
Right. The energy itself that we're going to be feeding off from the center of the galaxy is going to force us all to wake up, whether we like it or not.
That's right. Can we talk about Mars for just a couple of minutes? I know we're just about out of time here, but
sure.
I put a little extra time on the clock here, and I wanted to ask you about sandworms on Mars. It looks like sandworms, like the movie Dune. What in the world are these things on there? There's so many things on Mars that.
There are things that look like sandworm carcasses. There's no way around it. They could be that. They look like ribs. I think what a lot of these are actually you're seeing the structural ribs of a transportation system. Some of the best photographs of this stuff looks like there's some sort of, again, clear tube, maybe made of some kind of glass, and that these arches are structural supports for that. They appear to wrap completely around. NASA says they're sand dunes, which is just utterly absurd and completely ridiculous. And I don't think anybody really believes they're sand dunes. There's even geologists who will tell you that the sand dunes explanation is complete nonsense. So they could be sandworms. There's no question that Arrakis is, I believe, Mars. I mean, symbolically, Arrakis is Mars, and it's something about our ancient past that happened on Mars that Frank Herbert was trying to tell us. It's all part of the pattern of getting us to wake up and, appreciate and understand who we are and where we came from. And more I'm beginning to think that genetically where we came from, a lot of us is probably Mars. So
there's so many mysteries out there, and I know they want to keep it from us. They want us to be in the dark. And the thing is, we're just too smart for that. We are. And right now.
Look, my next book in 2013 is going to be Ancient Aliens on Mars. That's the next thing to go after. So that's what we're going to be doing next year, and we can talk about it when that book comes out.
Well, I look forward to it, Mike. Well, our time is just about up here. So, would you give out your website again? I put the wrong one on the chat room here, and I did correct it a few minutes ago. So, would you give that out?
Sure, it's Mike Bara with one R, B-A-R-A, MikeBara.blogspot.com. And I think all you have to do is just type Mike Bara into Google, and that's the first thing that comes up. You'll also see I have some very severe critics that are just, can I say this on your program, batshit crazy.
You can say
they say all kinds of nutty stuff about me. Just don't believe it. So anyway, MikeBara.blogspot.com. You can connect with me on Facebook. I think I'm pretty filled up on fans right now. Our friends, I've got 5,000 friends, but I do have an author page, Mike Bara Author. You can join in on that, and I do keep that updated. And also you can follow me on Twitter, connect with me on Twitter. I'm MikeBara33, and I've got a YouTube channel. And all that stuff is connected through the main site, which is MikeBara.blogspot.com. And you can pick up Ancient Aliens on the Moon and The Choice, The Dark Mission. You can usually pick them up at any Barnes & Noble or physical bookstores, or you can pick them up, obviously, through Amazon, get them on Kindle. And you can even go to Adventures Unlimited Press and get Ancient Aliens on the Moon direct. And also on the blog, there's a link there if you want me to send you an autographed copy of Ancient Aliens on the Moon. I'd be glad to do that also.
Oh, great. Do you have any conferences coming up, Mike?
I don't really have anything coming up right now. The next big thing for me will probably be Conscious Life Expo in February, but I do have a major new project for next year that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but I'm going to be taking up a lot of my time after the first of the year. But I understand that they're going to be using some of my Ancient Aliens interviews that I've done before. Apparently I'm going to be in some season 5 episodes of Ancient Aliens. I'm looking forward to seeing myself on that. And
awesome.
And then I also have this other project that I'm working on, which I can't talk about yet. But,
great.
That's going to be coming along too.
I'd love to get you back on the show sometime. We could just talk about this, I think, for hours.
Sure, Betsy. Anytime, especially these 1-hour interviews, I love them because they're so easy to do. So anytime that you just get a hold of my manager, as you did before, and let me know if you have an open spot. And I'll come on. Look, this is the time of year that I'm promoting Ancient Aliens on the Moon. It's before Christmas, so anytime you want to have me back, I'm glad to come back.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you, Mike, and I wish you all the best with all your books. I loved your book, and I know it's probably selling like hotcakes out there. So
I hope so.
Thank you again. And I want to thank everyone for listening tonight. This concludes our show for tonight. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm going to be on Coast to Coast AM this Friday. I'm so excited. Oh, my gosh. I think I'm dreaming. I keep pinching myself. But I hope you'll tune in if you get a chance. And my next show will be Monday, November 19th at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. That's with the international psychic Natasha Rosewood. And she's going to be talking about her spiritual and paranormal experiences and how she became an international psychic. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Mike, again. And this concludes the show. Until next time, keep those rainbow visions in your heart. Blessings, everybody.